Okay, and welcome everyone to our quarterly secure stage strategy review. I'm David DeSanto, Senior Director of Product for our SEC section. So we're focused on the secure and defend or secure and protect stages. Today we'll be giving a secure strategy update. I'm joined by all the PMs who are here to give you brief updates, but we're also here to answer your questions. I see some people have already added some questions to the documents. We'll place those over at the end. And our goal is to leave a good chunk of time for Q&A today. So feel free to ask questions along the way or add them to the document and we can answer them during the Q&A part. So the speaker order today will be me first, as I'm already talking, followed by Matt to give an update on vulnerability management. Sam White is here, even though he's part of Protect. We'd like him to give an update on the security orchestration category, which goes across stages. That'll be followed up by me playing Taylor to give an update on SAST, Derek for DAST, Nicole for dependency scanning, and then Sam Kerr will take us home with Fuzz Testing. Before we get started, I wanted to highlight a couple of some accomplishments since the last time we talked. First, we continue to see a rapid adoption rate for Secure, and that's due to all of the hard work you are all putting in. It's also leading to, by extension, accelerated growth in our Gold and Ultimate ARR. I can't stress enough how awesome we're doing as a team and as a stage. We're definitely making an impact both for the company and for our customers as well. We also had vulnerability management move to viable maturity this week. That's big and exciting as well. We also have Fuzz Testing nearing viable as well. I believe Sam is kicking off the CMS process. And SAST is very close as well. And if people have questions about that, I'll do my best to answer. If not, maybe Thomas could also play Taylor. Maybe together we can have the energy Taylor has. Next, and I'll share my screen so you can see some of these. But we are getting very good coverage within the industry for what we are doing today. So first, this is a new report that just came out, but GigaOM listed us in their, basically on their leader line here with an arrow getting very close to the center. And you'll notice that that's a third party giving us their external review and talking to our customers, and they're seeing us as providing a lot of value. Forrester also included us in their Tech Tide for application security with a call out to our new API security focus between the Fuzz Testing team and the DAST team. So it's also very exciting. And the last thing I want to highlight is we're seeing some really great initial results with the work the vulnerability management team or vulnerability research team is doing. Whether it's the recent data that was provided for the vulnerability fingerprinting and tracing, the great demo video that James gave related to that, or the numbers that Seth and the VR team are sharing with regards to what Browserifter is showing. So a lot of great work happening on initial results that I expect we'll have more to talk about in the next quarter. The updates to our one-year plan, if you all got a chance to read it, you may have noticed. The first thing is we moved protocol fuzzing up to what's next from what we're not doing in the next 12 months. Sam will probably touch on this during his direction, but at a high level, we're getting a lot of great response from what we're doing in Fuzz Testing, and people are asking for the protocol fuzzer to be available as soon as possible. And so I know Sam is working with the team to see how we can begin to pivot towards that. The other change is we push vulnerability, or machine learning out of the next 12 months. That's primarily due to the fact that we have a single person group now. Stan Hugh, if you're not familiar with him, he's a distinguished engineer who's working on our initial goals for MLOps and insider threat. So because of that, we've kind of pulled that out of the current plans for secure, and we'll let that work through. I'll include a link to this. Taylor put this together to kind of show how we see that space broken into different groups and what we're working on first. And again, insider threat is really the direction that Matt defined for UEBA with some updates, and that's kind of our first focus there. The last thing I wanted to touch on, let me stop sharing so you can all see me. Some areas that I think that we should also focus on that are outside the direction. The first is usability, and I think a lot of you have seen that recently. congratulations to the SaaS team for making that one of their focuses. We're definitely seeing the improvement in usability on the SaaS side. And I know that's a question that Seth has in the agenda. But I know the rest of the teams are working on that as well. So just keep that in the back of your minds as you're working on things, that as we continue to grow, more users are using the product, we need to make sure it's easy to use, easy to approach, and easy to understand the results. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt, who's going to go through vulnerability management.
Great, thanks, David. So I'll start off with a cheat. I didn't list 2 to 3 recent items making a difference because I think that's going to be harder to pick out individual things. And instead, I want to focus on sort of the totality of what we've delivered on the vulnerability management team over the past several months. It includes a lot of things on the back end as well that are not necessarily visible, specifically around consistency when it comes to the MR, what you're seeing in the security widget and the diff. So all of this is to say, David, you kind of stole my thunder. That is my highlight here, but as of yesterday, our category is officially at viable maturity, which is extremely exciting and impressive because we just moved to minimal 8 months ago. So that's actually 2 maturity revs within the calendar year. It has made such a huge difference to folks that are using it, not just externally, but internally. So I linked to the category maturity scorecard.
That's really cool. It's great work by everybody involved.
It's pretty fantastic. So the category maturity scorecard is, if you're not familiar, it's what we're using internally now to measure when we have achieved a next maturity level. And it basically involves putting, depending on where you're at, internal or external users in front of your product, and you walk them through their primary sort of jobs, and you see, can they do it or not? And it's a user rating system. So pretty exciting. And to kind of show off a little bit more specifically, I'm going to share a slide here. I can find my right window. So just to give a sense of where vulnerability management, this is what we only had a security dashboard. So this is also kind of another little thing, which included, right here is just the vulnerability list. It was a very kind of a limited, here's what we found in your default branch. And at the group level, we had a widget on the same page. So it was kind of a lot of information, one screen. And you'll notice there's not a lot you can do here. This was just about maybe 6 to 8 months ago. This is what things look like today. We have on the project security dashboard, we now have information about the latest pipeline. So you can see at a glance, is there a problem, which may indicate I need to go rerun security jobs to get the most up-to-date results. We've added things like multi-select, and right now you can bulk dismiss. Coming soon, we'll have the ability to actually change status to other things as well. Detected date, it's little things like this. We weren't listing the detection date, so it was hard to know if vulnerabilities were stale or not. Sortability, little things, again, that add up to big impact on the way that like AppSec teams actually try to do their triage work, allowing them to focus in on exactly what they need. Is it by status, detection date, severity, et cetera. Other things like showing if we've got related issues or if there's actually a vulnerability has been remediated and it just needs somebody to review and accept. So this is kind of the snapshot of what we've got today and the culmination of like the last 6 to 8 months worth of work. So super excited about that. I want to call attention to the direction page really quickly. If you haven't looked at it for a while, not a lot of big updates, except I added this graphic, which you can look at a little bit more in your own time to kind of give some more insight into the way that I'm thinking about this. We're sort of building up. The last year has really been focused on the foundation, which is if you can't have a viable triage and remediation process, there's not really any vulnerability management. So that's why we focus so heavily on the AppSec side. Over the next year, we'll start to focus a lot more on the developer side of the experience, as well as getting more higher level information in there, such as like risk-based information and controls as well. coming up over the next 3 to 6 months, this was a hard list to narrow down. There's actually a lot more than this in flight right now that we'll see over the next just release or two. Key highlights are generic schema report. So a huge shout out to James Johnson. This is work that he started to basically allow us to have a more flexible information structure. It is a way that we think we can onboard not just new information from our internal scanners, but partners as well. And it opens up the door to really write some cool custom built tools that will integrate into the vulnerability management workflow. Jira Integration is another exciting one that we've got in flight right now. We're working on the MVC. So this is probably the highest requested feature that we have in vulnerability management from customers, which is creating issues in Jira from a vulnerability. What's really exciting about this is that we will be the first area in all of GitLab where you can actually make something in Jira directly from the GitLab interface. So that's pretty cool. So it's a single click to get there. And then finally, I've linked, this is a little bit further out, but I've been working with Andy. I should say working with Andy's been doing the majority of this work here, but he has outlined this is kind of our broad future vision for the vulnerability management UI over the next probably 6 to 12 months. It's still at the very beginning of solution validation, so not quite ready for consumption, but I put it there so people can get an early look to see where we're headed. A little bit more tactically, one of the shorter term pieces is manually creating vulnerability information. Today, if it doesn't come from a scanner, it doesn't get into the system. So I want to show off very quickly what we've got in mind for this. You'll see this fairly soon. Adding a new finding is going to be as simple as going to your vulnerability dashboard. You can fill in your basic information like you want. Say, whatever. Possible SQL injection. You can fill in your description. How did you find it? So this is good for if you're, maybe you had an external report from a bug bounty program, could have been a customer, maybe it was an internal code review. So we're adding these detection methods, which you'll see in the dashboard as well. And then if I need to add anything like evidence, this is kind of neat. So maybe I have a file I'd like to upload to include as part of that evidence, or potentially even a code snippet. Once I'm done with that and I write it all up, I can submit it. And then now I have vulnerabilities that I've created that will go into the regular security dashboard, just like everything else. And I think I'm probably way over time at this point, so I'll go ahead and stop my share.
You are. I will use the Zoom chat to keep you all aware of your 5 minutes, and in case of Matt being over by 3. So Sam White, you want to go next?
Awesome. Well, thanks. Those looks like some great features, Matt. For security orchestration, this is a new category in GitLab, and it's one that spans both secure and protect. So I just wanted to run through some of the high-level problems to solve. This is not a comprehensive list by any means, but some of the challenges that we're seeing, we've got organizations with a lot of projects and no way to manage those centrally. So if you want to turn on scanning and make sure it stays on for all of your projects in GitLab, right now that's rather difficult. Another problem is that turning on our scanners requires technical knowledge of YAML, and that works for some individuals. For others, it's a little bit too complex and not easy enough to set up. And then lastly, we don't have a good place to review any kind of security alerts in the UI. So those are some of the problems that we aim to solve. As part of this, I have just a rough prototype, and I've linked to this in the agenda as well, but we're planning to create a dedicated page for policies, and policies are intended to span, again, across both secure and protect, really to encompass any kind of security policy that you might want to create. So today, our policies are limited to just container runtime policies, which are related to protect. But for secure, we're planning to add in both scan execution and scan results policies in the future. The way that works is you get somewhat of an English language if this then that statement that you can then go through and add clauses to. So you can say if a pipeline is run on the default or master branch, then I want to require SAS to run, and I want to also require Dast to run, for example, and you can then specify the settings that you want to use to run that scan. You could also use this to do things like schedule a scan to be run on a regular interval, or you could also, in the future, potentially run some of these scans even at commit time when a commit is pushed up to a branch. The most useful one for that would be something like secret detection, if you're wanting to prevent secrets from ever even making it into the code base to begin with. On the scan results policy side, these types of policies govern what happens when a scan completes rather than when a scan runs. So with this type of policy, you can say if any scan finds one or more critical vulnerabilities, I want to fail the pipeline and I want to send a Slack notification to let me know about it, for example. And again, you can customize this depending on your needs. If it's license compliance, maybe you're looking for certain licenses. But again, right now, this is all a prototype. The prototype is way ahead of where we actually are today because the category is so new. Just to give you some context into that, here's sort of a really big matrix of all of the scanners that we like to support, along with the different types of policies. And we also want to do this at the project, the group level, and the instance level. So for now, our initial MVC is starting just with Dast, and we're starting just with scheduled scans. So the ability to schedule a scan to run on a regular daily or weekly interval. And again, for our MVC, we're scoping that just to the project level so we can get our feet under us and get our initial architecture in place. After that, we plan to expand to SAST as well as to move that up to the group and instance levels. Some guiding principles that were not covered in that brief demo. We do want to make sure that all of the policy changes are audited. We also want to provide for a two-step approval process so no one can edit the policies by themselves, and a few others in there as well. But just wanted to provide that at a high level since this is going to touch pretty much all of the scanners in Secure at some point, some sooner and some later. That being said, David, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Sam. To kind of provide some highlights for SAST, I do recommend, if you've not had the chance to read through the updates tailored to the direction page, there's a lot of really good detail on there. From a recent items that Taylor called out, so from the agenda document, the first thing he highlighted was custom rules that has been made available for SAST and secret detection. We're getting customers actively engaging with us on this, and he's noted that some customers are beginning to write their own rule sets, and they're seeing that as an improvement. And I actually had a quarterly executive business review with one of our customers' leadership team, and this was actually called out by our sponsor there, the person who uses the product, or at least helps the company use the product the most, as something they're seeing as a great improvement to the results they're seeing with SAST and secret detection. The next one I'm very excited about as well. We now support mobile languages. I can't say enough how excited it is to see a customer make this contribution. So if you're unaware, the HEB digital team saw this on the roadmap, and Taylor and Thomas did not see it getting done until early next year. They wanted it immediately. They did the integration work for MobSF, and they contributed that back into our code base so everyone can use it. So that's very exciting to have that support and to have that community being formed around our product. And then finally, the post-processing of leaked secrets. This is something we wanted to get out to support our cloud partners as well as our customers. This is now a step where we can actually call revocation of leaked secrets in public projects. So as we have open source customers who are having public projects, some companies like us also do that, we're able to call AWS to revocate the key before it's abused by someone by being leaked publicly. So those are some of the things that are planned.
Comment on that. The post-processing of leaked secrets, many companies have such a problem with that. When a secret is leaked, tracking where it's in use, revoking it, updating, things to the new secret. Some companies have thousands of secrets that they manage, and it becomes an unwieldy mess. So I think this will be really popular, especially with enterprise customers.
Yeah. And by the way, the best way to work around what Wayne's talking about is if you make all your passwords the asterisk, so just 8 of those, it looks like it's encrypted when you're typing it, and it's secret. That's just a really bad security joke. So anyway, yeah, what I was going to say as well is that this is already having a big impact, even though it just recently came out. Taylor and Thomas and the stack analysis team also partnered with Global Search and the changes in Global Search to make it so our search doesn't actually return sensitive data. It's also made a big impact as well. So for some things coming up that he's excited about, that we'll hop to a combination of the comment he has in there about reducing false positives and vet. So this is a video that's linked off the issue, and Taylor has it in the agenda document. But if you're not unfamiliar with what's going on within the project, this is a great walkthrough that James did. I hopped near the end. We're all familiar with what the pipeline view looks like. On a scan prior to using vet, there were 3 returned vulnerabilities, and actually 2 of those are false positives. And so what the vulnerability research team is working on is the ability to identify that and mark them as such. And so if I hop ahead a little bit here, here's an example of what James demoed. So this was automatically marked as a false positive by us because we're able to look at the tree of the application and determine that it was actually not remotely exploitable. And to kind of walk you through it, this line here is what was flagged by the scanner. So here you can see it works its way back up to where that is actually called. And you can see the return value is actually just static text. It's not a place where a user or an attacker could inject something to be executed. And so because of that, it was able to be marked as a false positive. Now that's still visible to the customer, so they can review it and decide it's not a false positive. But this is the work that Taylor wants to highlight that the vulnerability research team is doing, and now is also doing in conjunction with the stack analysis team. The final thing was our push to get adoption in earlier tiers. Again, the stack analysis team has taken the first jump out of the gate by bringing the SAST open source scanners to core. And now we're beginning to build out usability for them so they can get up and running better. And this is just going to be a basic functionality. It's going to allow them to click the enable with a merge request, and it's just going to enable the scanner in the pipeline. But that, as was highlighted by a couple people before myself and probably be highlighted again, this is where customers are getting tripped up as we've expanded our customer base. Not everybody's as technical as some of our original customers. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Derek to go over DAST.
All right, thank you, David. So the main things that I wanted to talk about with DAST, I wanted to go over a little bit about what we have already done, and then talk about a few things that we have coming up. So let me go ahead and share my screen. The main thing that we've been focusing on recently is the on-demand scans. As many of you know, this is really being focused on developers and security team members who want to run DAST scans outside of their pipelines to scan code that's already been deployed and when there's no changes to code. So one of the main things that we've been adding on after the MVC release of the on-demand scans are adding more options for users in here. So you can see, for example, there's now the active versus passive mode, and then we'll also be adding in this release, hopefully, the plan is to add in things like authentication and header support. So we're hoping to have this fully GA'd this release. We'll see how things work out with that, but adding in all those additional options are really what will get us to the GA and really increase usage of the on-demand scans as more people find it useful for their sites. So we've got that going on, and then moving forward, we're focusing on removing the noise that DAS can cause within the dashboards and the vulnerability reports by aggregating the DAS vulnerabilities. So anybody that's run a DAS scan can know that sometimes, depending on how many pages you have in your application, we can report a single vulnerability hundreds or thousands of times, depending on the number of pages. So we're working on aggregating all of those into a single vulnerability with the URLs listed out so that you only have to deal with one of them, especially when the fix is typically one thing that could fix it for all the pages, such as a server header or a line of code that's being included on all the pages. Moving past that, we're also actively working on integrating Peach API scanning for DAST. We already have API scanning right now, but integrating Peach allows us to get a lot of new features out of the gate, including things like SOAP scanning, which is something that we don't have right now, and multiple different entry points for the API, other than just an open API spec, which is what we support currently. And then, of course, a lot of you know that we're working on Browserker, which is a browser-based scanner for DAST. The first thing that we're doing with Browserker is going to be adding that in as our new spider option. We've already done multiple tests with that, and we get much greater coverage spidering with Browserker than we do with the current spider options. So this will allow for much better code coverage and users being sure that their entire application is being scanned rather than a small subset. Past that, we're going to be focusing on UI configuration, working with Sam White and his team to do scheduled scans within the policies UI, and trying to build out better UI options for the customers that are using DAS, so that configuration is not as big of a sticking point as it is right now. So that is mainly what we've got going on in DAST. So you can see in the direction page here that we've got a lot of things coming up, and some of these things are going to be taking longer than others, such as Peach and Browserker being implemented. So there may be a few releases here where we don't have major feature updates, but hopefully when we do release these things, you can see the massive benefit that they'll get us. And with that, I will hand it back off to Nicole.
All right. Hopefully I'm sharing the correct desktop. Guess we'll find out. So recently we added NuGet package manager support, which gave us C#, which looking at the language statistics for projects of ultimate users is now 3% of composition analysis users. So those are users that up to that point couldn't use dependency scanning at all. So I think that's pretty exciting that we enabled all of those people to start using our scans. In addition, we also have been working on merge request approval improvements steadily for a while. I don't know if anybody has tried to set those up before, but we added these nice little popovers to help you easily set it up and know if you've got like a license check active, or over here, if you're on the page, you can see that there's vulnerability check, license check, and whether it's enabled or not. Previously, you had to read the documentation, copy paste that exact name, and set up that group in order for it to function. I do not yet have statistics. I'm working with the data team to find out how many of these are currently in use today, but I know that this is a frequently asked question previously. I haven't been getting it for the past few months, so fingers crossed that means this has been working. How do we prevent vulnerabilities, critical vulnerabilities from going out to production, or how do I prevent licenses that we want to deny from going out to production? And the answer is to use the merge request approvals. As far as things that are coming up You all saw this with the SAST items, but we're going to be mimicking SAST in order to add and enable via MR for dependency scanning. Much like with the merge request approvals, today you need to either go read the documentation and know that you have to use the dependency scanning template, or you have to copy paste some things. And that's fine for a technical user, but what if you just want to quickly grab this and go and try it out? Or what if you're a little bit less technical? We're going to go ahead and just make that MR for you. And then that does edit your pipeline config YAML, so you can see what it's doing in the MR request. And then if this is as effective as it was for SAST, we'll work on adding a configuration page next. And then the other thing that's coming up is dependency pathing. So today you can see on the dependency page that you've got a particular component with issues, but you may not know exactly where that's coming from. And this little popover is going to help you with that. We're going to implement this popover in multiple places. We're going to work through certain languages first, or at least certain lock files first, and then spread it out to everyone. And then the final thing that we're fingers crossed excited about is we're working to have a bot that can create merge requests based on the suggested solutions for findings. We may need to wait on some tweaks to the way that tokens work before we can actually release that to users, but to be determined. Hopefully we can get all that done under a feature flag and then just pop it out as soon as it's ready. And that's what I've got. And kicking it back over to Sam.
All right, thanks, Nicole. Yeah, so I was having a really fun time preparing for this meeting. I thought it was a good opportunity to take a step back, think about where we were a year ago, last December. The Fuzz Testing group did not exist at this point last year. I think it's been an incredible journey we've seen as our group has formed. We've finalized the 2 acquisitions of both Fuzzit and PeachTech, and we've completed, as of this quarter, our first integrations of both products. It's been amazing to see what the team has been able to accomplish this year, and I'm really excited to see what we're going to do next year. And so with that, I'll share my screen, and we're going to go through the Fuzz Testing direction page. In a similar vein, I realize that every iteration of this meeting, I've gone over time while reviewing this direction page. So please take a read of this asynchronously. There is an Easter egg in there. If you find it, let me know. But I just wanted to focus on a couple parts of this page that I think are really worth highlighting. We've made a large amount of progress this past year, but one of our key areas of focus is still going to be around the usability issues with Fuzz testing. This category in this space, we're really up against the misconception that Fuzz testing is very hard to use and difficult to use. And so that's why one of our guiding principles is that usability for Fuzz testing and making customers and end users able to use it successfully without much or any of our help is really going to be paramount. And I hope that you'll see that as part of some of the things we've recently shipped and where we're going. And to talk about some of the things that we've recently done, I wanted to highlight 3 main things. You've probably seen them in the release posts, but we offered support for additional languages instead of coverage guided fuzzing. When we released the first iteration of coverage guided fuzzing, we had a set of languages that we offered support for, such as C++, Rust, and another 1 or 2. But we know that our end users use a lot more languages than just those. We were recently able to add support for languages such as Java, which we know that our customer base, even if it's not the traditional fuzzing set of users, that's what our customers and our end users are using. So I'm really excited we were able to bring this as part of GitLab. In a similar way, with that usability focus, after we had released our Java support, we started working with end users, and we found that the way we had approached it using the JQF engine for fuzzing didn't fit all of the use cases around Java, specifically where customers and end users were using Spring. I was really proud of the team, how quickly we were able to iterate, show those GitLab values to be able to put something in the product that would enable those end users to successfully use fuzzing on their projects. And also, we completed our first delivery of API fuzz testing, and we've done a number of enhancements on it as well. So now our end users are able to use the files they likely already have in their projects that they would have had as part of a normal QA process, such as a Postman collection, a HAR file, or an Open API specification. They can easily add API fuzz testing directly into those projects with GitLab. And so all three of these things are really impactful. We're seeing a lot of really good commentary when we work with sales, when we work with end users and customers directly. And if you want to go read more about them, there's a link to each of their respective release posts. So that's where we've been. Let's talk a little bit about where we're going. David talked about a couple of the points, but let's drill down a bit. And really one of the key areas we're going to be focusing on in the near future is around API fuzz testing and making the results that we show, which are currently today inside of our test tab on a pipeline, make those really feel like every other security scanner. We're going to be making those results show up in the security dashboard, MR widgets, pipeline security tabs, everywhere else another scanner's results would show up. We're also going to be focusing on allowing coverage guided fuzzing users to manage their corpus objects more easily. Today, end users have to add potentially large binary files to their Git repos, which can cause some friction. And we think we can do a better job at providing them a better experience than what they have today. We talked about languages previously. We're not done with language support. We've seen a number of end users, a number of customers requesting various languages such as JavaScript, Python, C#, and Ruby. And so those are going to be areas that we're going to continue to focus on to make sure that if any of our customers or end users have a project in GitLab, we can support them with fuzzing technology. And then another thing I wanted to highlight that we're going to be focusing on, it's not so much directly related to technology, but building awareness about fuzz testing, the problem it solves, why it's important, and how GitLab is unique and how we approach it is going to be an area of focus for fuzz testing this coming year. Like I mentioned before, one of the obstacles we face is misconceptions about fuzz testing that come from many years ago when fuzz testing was very different. And so to help address those, we're going to be hosting live sessions to talk to the community about this, talking to GitLab internal teams, writing articles and blogs to really help with that educational aspect. I see David's 1 minute left mark in chat, so hopefully we're not too far over. But the last thing I wanted to highlight was protocol fuzz testing. Protocol fuzz testing is another piece that came with the PeachTech acquisition, and we're going to be working on our plans in 2021 on how we're going to bring that to market. Our current direction is that we want to open source portions of the Peach engine. I'm really excited about this because it's going to allow for community contributions, people to add features, fix bugs, and then we'll figure out how certain parts are going to live inside of Gold or Ultimate. We know the appetite is there. I've talked to, I think, probably 3 different sales teams every single week for the past month, asking what are we doing for protocol fuzzing, when is it available? And I'm really excited about where these items are going to take us in 2021. And so with that, that is the overview of fuzz testing, where we've been, where we're going. And with that, I'll pass it back to David.
Hey, thanks everyone for the great updates. We can go into the questions now. Todd, would you like to voice over Seth's questions, or is Seth on?
I saw that Seth looked like he had joined here. So Seth, did you want to voice your questions?
I got to find the document, so maybe you can go ahead and get started.
Okay, sure. So I'll voice over question 1. And that is, what is the future of YAML versus database configuration? Should our tools be zero config like SaaS-like tools, or are we still pipeline oriented? We're taking both approaches today, so it seems like an unanswered question. And it goes on, SaaS has a merge request generator, Dast has on-demand scans. Meanwhile, we have criticisms about why GitLab can't detect secrets unless a pipeline is created. And moving secure to zero config or SaaS-like would change the adoption journey so that secure does not rely on verify acceptance. Users could get functionality even if they don't adopt verify. So, David, it looks like you've got some responses there.
Yeah, and actually I missed the last part of that, so maybe I'll speak to that first. What's the best way to word this? So as a stage, Seth points to the user adoption journey there, which if you've not seen it, it says you must actually adopt, create, and then verify to get to secure. We're actually seeing that change within our customer base. One of our large government-based customers in the APAC region was actually adopting secure by first using Jenkins. So they were using us as a CI, but they were using us for SCM, but not for CI. And that's due to the work that all of you have done to have standard APIs that can be called from anywhere. Now, all of us know that in the back end, that means that we actually are spinning up a pipeline. It's just Jenkins is calling us to do that. But from the user's perspective, they don't see it that way. They see that they were still using their traditional CI. So I see that adoption journey kind of morphing over the next 12 months. I will state I tried to update it in the handbook, and if someone can explain how to make Mermaid do what you want it to do, I would probably have submitted my merge request. Instead, somehow I made almost like a half circle by trying to modify the existing rendered out Mermaid diagram. To go through the rest of the questions, like should our tools be zero config? We're actually seeing customers leverage auto DevOps to kind of get close to that. I don't remember where the team was on making a demo of this, but literally with a couple of clicks, you can be up and running and getting secure results, leveraging auto DevOps. But kind of as I touched on at the beginning, and you're seeing the examples that Seth is calling out, we need to be able to handle customization in an easy way. And so SAS is trying out the merge request approach. DAS with on-demand is creating profiles to try to do that. As that plays out, there's probably going to be a point where YAML becomes less of a thing. That kind of goes to my last comment, which I'll make here in a minute. Are we still pipeline oriented? Yes, we are developer persona first, and developers can be leveraging pipelines, but that does not prevent us from trying to support other things like DAS on demand. And then on the comment about the future of YAML, I think this one's actually a really tricky question. I tried to figure out a way to word this in a way that I'm not saying we're doing one over the other in the short term. And it's because we're just not. Like, we're going to be iterative about this. Seth and Derek with Dast are moving towards the database. I think Nicole is looking at that with Olivier as the next step as well. And so I expect that probably over the next, again, year, depending on where we end up on usability, we may not be using the YAML file either directly or potentially using indirectly via the UI making updates, which is what the SAS team is doing today. Olivia, I don't know if you want to voice over your comment on
that. Because indeed, dropping the YAML is a drastic change in our vision. It also comes with a lot of changes in the way we are supporting the execution of our tools. And to achieve the main goal, which is an easier adoption and a non-YAML configuration, there are intermediary steps. And I think James provided a nice breakdown of those by having a dynamically generated CI YAML config from a UI. So I encourage you to have a look at this as this issue, because I think it's clearly highlights the same benefits you're looking for without getting drastically away from the pipeline.
Yeah, that's why I kind of said I think we're a far ways away from making that final decision. I did not see James's link, so I'll check that out. But I'm basically trying to say, Seth, without answering the question, like, maybe. Like, I think it just depends on where we all go and how we meet that need of usability. Nicole, well, I can read Taylor's, but Nicole and I guess Olivia, you've got a couple of their comments. Do you want to vocalize those as well?
Basically, in the far future, I want to burn it with fire. But in the interim, I think doing a database-driven dynamic generation of a child pipeline is probably going to be where we're going to be for the foreseeable future, just because of life, the universe, and everything. So I think that'll solve our problems in the short term.
If I can voice a potentially contrarian point of view. None of our secure jobs are configured by YAML. The build pipelines are, and it passes environment variables which configure our jobs. YAML is simply an interface by which our configurations are expressed, and we should not consider ourselves wed to that. There is a level of indirection that we are forgetting or not articulating here.
That's a good point. I mean, it does kind of fit in with Taylor's comment, Thomas. Like, he says he's a fan of it because it aligns with what our pipeline configurations. But when I had this conversation with, I think it was Derek and Nicole, there's that indirection that can be used to address some of the usability concerns that have been raised. I don't remember if it was Derek or if it was Taylor. So we'll say it's Derek because he's the one on the call. But he spent a decent amount of time with a customer trying to figure out why something wasn't running. And it was just a typo somewhere in the YAML file was causing the scanner to not operate, possibly because invalid information was passed to it. That's what we're trying to address in this conversation as a high level. And so Seth, like I said, it really depends on how we address that to make sure typos are not causing failed security tests. Willie, did you want to vocalize your F before we go on to question 2?
Yeah, one other aspect that could be helpful is in this vision of detaching our features from the pipeline is this idea of having hidden or ghost pipeline. I just found back the issue that Philip suggested to have. Again, from the user perspective, this is not leveraging the pipeline, but it still provided us with the same execution environment. So this could be one more way to achieve that.
Yeah, Sam K, like you did a little bit of work on that back with me, with Philippe. I think you found that we could actually spin off child pipelines pretty easily and effectively. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the short summary of it. So we could create a pipeline that's not necessarily attached to an individual commit or merge request. So it could start, stop, be restarted, independently of a developer working on a piece of code necessarily. That might be a way that we could start approaching something like this.
But we did start, Olivier, with that ghost pipelines issue with Philippe on that. I think it was back in the summer. Okay, Seth, you want to vocalize your next question?
Yeah, so the next question is, we've got a number of tools that we are proprietary to GitLab, Gymnasium, Fuzzing, Browserker. We talked about that today. So just curious if this is kind of a strategy of like trying to get more and more proprietary tools built at GitLab, or whether it just happens to be opportunistic and just to meet the needs of specific product functionality.
Nicole,
So I guess,
vocalize yours.
Yeah, for right now, there's a possibility we're going to do an analysis of the license items that are out in the open source environment today, because License Finder just is not, it's not doing it. And we are definitely going to evaluate, can we just have Gymnasium do a little bit extra and cover that use case and not have to use an open source tool? And we're going to evaluate, how much work is that going to be? How long is it going to take us versus how long would it take to just bring this in, and then ongoing maintenance. So I am hoping that each time there's some kind of new item out there, I mean, obviously there is tons of open source projects out there, that at least for my group, that's a consideration that we take into play. But I'm not actively hunting down things that are external to us, or I'm not actively, for one or the other. It's more each time we notice something, hey, let's do an eval.
Yeah, to kind of add to that, so I would state that there's not an objective or metric we're looking to measure as part of this. I think what's being seen is that we're choosing to, in some cases, acquire technology, like in the case of Peach Tech, where there wasn't a good open source alternative to make that work, as well as continue to invest in securing the open source community. And Fuzz had a bunch of open source components to it that we've left open source. Browserker started as an open source project as well, and that's still being maintained. It's really coming down to and maybe Seth has seen this the most of all the EMs, the reviews of build versus buy versus partner. And I expect that we'll continue to do all three as we continue to mature our portfolio. To me, it really comes down to how do we meet the customer's needs? Like, what's the best way to do that? And you can see that in what Nicole just said with License Finder, like it's not meeting our customers' needs. So they're exploring other open source scanners, and if not, they'll extend Gymnasium to support that. And that's really why we ended up with the two acquisitions we had. And I see us, again, continue to do that as need be. Taylor's comment relates to something that he's seeing in the market, needing to have a component that's proprietary related to data intelligence. And this comes down to a question that customers used to pose to us back in the beginning of the year, and not so much now, is why pay you for Ultimate when I can just grab the same open source scanner and start in the pipeline and deal with the results wherever they land? And so what Taylor is seeing is the need to have custom rule sets, decisions being driven off of data as a way to say, yeah, sure, you can use Brakeman today yourself, but you're not getting that intelligence of what I just showed that from James's video, which James on the call, I could have just had him walk through his video in hindsight, but you know, you got to hear my voice instead of his talk about what was on the screen. So Derek, did you want to add your comment as well?
Sure. Yeah, mine, I mean, I agree with what Taylor said. We're seeing that with Dast as well. But really for us, the choice to build Browserker, it comes down to, we didn't specifically try to invent anything. We're looking for open source tools, but the opportunity provided by having Isaac in the VR team and having Browserker be a project that he had already started and was working on was just way too good to pass up. You know, we have that expertise here, so why not leverage it and continue to build what he started. Technically, it is still an open source tool, so that gets a little fuzzy because it's, you know, it's similar to if we did grab an open source tool from the market, but we happen to have the main developer working for us. So it seems like it's an internal thing more than it is leveraging open source, but at the same time, it is still leveraging open source. So it's a little bit of an odd duck there.
And I'll just throw in mine. I actually have been encouraging this on the vulnerability research team for a few reasons. You know, Taylor and Derek basically just voiced one of them. We believe that we have the expertise and we've done searches and it just made sense to build it in-house. And the other one is, as we're getting ready to go public, you know, we're actually, we're trailblazing the patent process for GitLab, because right now GitLab doesn't have much or any patents that I'm aware of. So having patents under our belt as we're getting ready to, as we're marching towards being a public company, makes for a very good story.
To vocalize mine, I think a lot of this we're seeing is in each of those scenarios, we did a build versus buy versus partner sort of trade-off. I don't think we have an official X over Y stance. We do have an explicit principle about avoiding not invented here, though, just because something's not necessarily built at GitLab. So I mean, where there are those opportunities to either buy something, use an open source project, you know, we'll consider those and balance that between should we build it ourselves.
Thanks, everyone. We've got 5 minutes left and 2 questions, so I'd like to see if we can get through both of them. Olivier, do you want to vocalize 3?
Sure. I've seen a lot of praises from having a customer contributing and adding a brand new analyzer, which is MobSF. And I think this is a great argument to promote the usage of the common library as a framework to help building an analyzer. I don't know if this is something you want to build on and promote that to generate more contribution like this one, because I believe this is saving us quite some time. But at the same time, we have several discussion and decision that head toward having less constraint around a unique way to build an analyzer, which is an opposite direction of having a framework to tell how to build it. And there is no proper owner on that framework. And so I see two diverging goals here. So is this something we want to build on, which make an argument for keeping that framework, or is it something that we just benefit from right now and don't want to invest more there?
So I guess I'll vocalize what I'm writing, and then we can go into James and Matt's comments. But from my point of view, Olivia, the primary reason at least I am promoting the fact the customer did that is it's not necessarily that we got the scanner, though I'm sure Thomas's team likes having other people help with the volume of work they have planned. To me, it's about the fact the customer bought into our vision, our directional strategy for security, and it being part of the pipeline, it being developer friendly and all of that, because they made the conscious choice to say, I really like GitLab. I want to help get this done faster so everybody else can benefit from me like I'm benefiting from it. So I agree it should be easy to do. I just see today the challenge is balancing making it easier to do and the other things we've committed to try to do for our customers. So with that, James and Matt, do you want to vocalize your comments?
Yeah, let's see. So I wanted to mention that I created a standalone command line tool to generate security reports for the generic security reports brown bag that I did. In that brown bag or demo, I made a bash-based analyzer to detect time travelers, silly concept, but it was all from the command line. And it was super fun to do it. It took me maybe half an hour. And that with the details fields, I had custom information from bash as an analyzer. Yeah, anyway, so having an easy way to produce security reports in different scenarios, so from code or from the command line, to me, that makes writing analyzers fun. So I'm all for it.
So from my perspective, I would love, and this may be wildly unrealistic, but having the generic security report or a single point of entry is what I would love to see long-term for us for both third-party integrations and custom tools. What I have my perspective from the vulnerability management side is while the tools have a lot of very detailed information and they may have very specific meanings in the context of a given tool, when it comes to the actual output and the consumption of that, there's very little information that's actually needed to do logic inside of the GitLab application. The rest of it is presenting it in the vulnerability details page itself so that a user can understand what the tool output. The current formats, I think, are kind of looking what Sam is writing. So my early experience with some of the partner integrations is that they were constrained by the limitations of our scanner specific formats. The challenge is they're going to have different kinds of information they want to display. So I think even just in the shorter term, I linked there an MR working to put this generic details field, which is taken from kind of the single generic scanner report concept, and adding that in. That's kind of what I'm seeing as more important, is a way to be able to include sort of unstructured detail in a way that has definitive types that we can render consistently to the UI, so that we're not having to do this custom work every single time.
Yeah, so we're at time. I'm okay if people want to stay and go over the next question. If not, we can handle it synchronously because we have the time. I do want to end by saying, thank you very much, team, for putting together all the stuff to go over today. Everybody's really, really excited about it. So thank you for putting in that effort. So with that said, I'll stay on and let the recording keep on going if we want to finish up the last question.
So I guess that's me. So I just wanted to ask if we have any goals around visualizations or analytics around vulnerabilities. I guess I should also say not just vulnerabilities. I know we have concrete things about that, but also data generated about the vulnerabilities. And so one example is code coverage from fuzzing. That's not too hard to generate as we're doing fuzzing. Currently in the GitLab UI, you can see code coverage from testing, but as a user, and that knows that that information isn't that far off. Like I want to be able to see it in the UI somehow and know what is actually being fuzzed. But that's just one example. In the example for the vet false positive stuff that David showed, I showed data flows showing where the data flowed into a vulnerability finding. That could be a generic thing if the analyzer uses flows of data to determine if something is a vulnerability or not. So my question is about having goals or something long-term around making those types of extra data accessible and kind of in a single place, right? Without having to go into each individual vulnerability details. I hope that makes sense.
So I'm not 100% sure it's quite where you're headed, but I think the general answer is we haven't, at least on the vulnerability management side, spent a lot of time in the visualizations. That to me is sort of a secondary or tertiary thing to, can you just see the vulnerabilities, triage them and manage them? But to that end, splitting out the old dashboards and the vulnerability information, the lists, having that all on one page wasn't really conducive to expanding the visualizations. So that was kind of the primary step. So now you've got separate vulnerability reports and security dashboards at all levels. So we at least have a landing place for them. We do have, there's a vulnerabilities by age chart. That's kind of another common ask. I think the challenge is there are so many different possibilities and requests for custom visualizations. It could easily consume a team probably 2 or 3 times the size of the current Threat Insights team just doing visualizations. Personally, I don't want to be in that game. So what I sort of see the longer term is I would love for any of the scanner teams that have a visualization to be able to put that on the dashboard. That's kind of an option, now. And then long term, we'll need to provide some sort of a way to build visualizations, custom visualizations off of the data that we have available. But that's more of a grafting a BI tool on top of it. So that's probably much further out. The one missing piece is probably necessary to enable some of this is customization for the dashboard, by which I mean being able to turn things on and off at a group and project level, because I may not necessarily want to see the coverage guided fuzzing widget if there's nothing on that project, for instance. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So I think that the long and short of it is yes, but not in the near future.
Yeah, it's a big topic.
So
thank you.
Well, so I'll comment on the code coverage fuzzing example, because we are talking about how do we expose the percentage of the app that's been explored with the fuzzer. Like you said, a lot of fuzzers give that sort of information pretty easily. So if it's just a number, we can find a way to present that with our results. Kind of like what Matt was talking about longer term in terms of actual visuals, I think that's probably tricky. I'm personally really interested in exploring like what reverse engineering tools generally do. Like if you ever used a Hilbert curve to visualize coverage or seen tools like Cantor Dust, I think there's probably some out there like that we could potentially build off of that are open source, but we are a ways out from those.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then I just added that I think this is something Taylor also wants, and then Thomas responded. Do you want to end us up on the call, Thomas, by vocalizing your comment?
Yeah, sure. So related concepts been talked about as SaaS, secret detection, like heat maps as an idea of where are there clusters of vulnerabilities in parts of the applications that are being scanned. Other ideas have been talked about related to code coverage. What percent of your project has been covered by the various scan types? These are things that have been talked about, but have not progressed beyond the idea phase because we've got some fundamentals that we see need to be first before we're ready to start thinking about those.
Sweet. Thank you. It's something I was curious about, and I was excited to have everyone together so I could ask. I've been stewing on an idea that's very closely related to this. I just haven't written it up yet. Too many things on the burner right now.
Yeah, so on that note, I can't stress enough, the questions are great. They're huge questions, so I'm glad we have it. we'll continue to shift to more Q&A time as we move forward. Since every time we add more, we still go over. So we'll shorten the updates and make sure there's more time for Q&A. But thank you everyone for attending. I'll post the recording later today, and have a good rest of your day, rest of the week. And if I don't talk to you at all, have a good holiday.